name is Kenesha, and this is my story of finding me. So I became a mother at the age of 15 and 16. I can't really put into words like some of the feelings and some of the things that I was experiencing because it was just so much going on at that time. But I remember when I found out that I was pregnant with my daughter at the age of 15. And it was kind of like a blur. It just, being 15 years old, you don't really grasp that concept of being pregnant. Like, you're getting ready to have a baby. You don't really understand what's going on, the different changes in your body. And so I didn't acknowledge that I was pregnant. I just kind of went on about my daily life and did everything that I wanted to do. And then I had her in 1996. And then again, it was a blur. I don't remember the first 3 months of her being here because I'm a teenager and it was kind of like, what am I supposed to do? And then a few months later, I was pregnant again. At that point, I knew that I was pregnant. I knew what my body was doing. I knew what to expect, but I didn't know what I was going to do. It wasn't the best time for me to have a baby, let alone two babies. My kid's father, he ended up going to jail, getting arrested for a murder. I didn't have any support around me. I didn't have anywhere to live. My mother she was active in her addiction. She had a drug addiction. She had alcohol addiction. And my dad, he made some bad choices in it it landed him in jail. And I just bounced around from house to house, and I didn't have that structure. I didn't have anybody to sit me down and say, these are the steps, this is what you need to do, or talk to me, why are you doing this? I didn't have those conversations. It was just kind of me just being out and doing my thing however I wanted to do it. The only talk I did get was just a lot of negative talk, that I wasn't going to be nothing. I was going to be just like my mother. I was just a problem. Those words hurt. They hurt a lot. And because I knew that I wasn't going to be like my mother. I knew that I was going to be successful in my life. Now, where I was, it didn't really show that. It didn't, I couldn't see me being successful because I'm homeless. I'm living with my stepmother who's stressed out and don't know what to do with me, and I have 2 kids, and my daddy's in jail, my mother's, in the streets on drugs, and so it was just not the best time in my life. And I found myself homeless. Again, just going from house to house, going from my stepmother's house to my auntie house to a cousin house to a friend house that I met at my kids' school, and it was just a really rough time in my life. And I realized that I couldn't take care of both of my kids by myself. I didn't have any support, and so I made bad decisions where it landed me in jail, where I had to pay probation fees. I had to go to court. I was making just bad decisions out of survival. I was trying to survive, but the way I was trying to survive, they weren't the best ways of trying to survive. It was just, I need something right now. to get us by. I need Pampers today. I need shoes today. My daughter's clothes don't fit. My son don't have any toys. Like, we need somewhere to live. My kid, like, we just need everything. So I just didn't make the best decisions at that time. And again, just going from house to house. And a lot of people don't realize is that homelessness is not just what you see outside on the street. It's not living under the bridge. It's not just people living in tents, in tent city, in whatever area or city or state. It's right in front of you. It's your niece, it's your nephew, it's your uncle, going from house to house, living on the couch, making a pallet on the floor. It don't look exactly the way most people think it do. Yes, it exists, but it's not always like that. It's not so in your face all the time. Sometimes it's just subtle. I found myself some type of way. I found myself at my mother, living with my mother again. And that was kind of like my last resort because I didn't been to everybody's house. And for whatever reason, it didn't work out. Or they just got tired of me, or they, it was just too much to handle, and, it just didn't work out. And so I found myself living with my mother. I was working a small, like a McDonald's job. I was in school. I was really proud of myself. I'm thinking, okay, I can breathe a little bit. I can start achieving my goals. I can start doing the things that I really want to do. Now, mind you, I didn't finish high school. I didn't graduate high school. I didn't have a GED. I didn't have anything. I had to stop going to school because of being homeless. I didn't have the support. And so I was living with my mother, and I had a small job at McDonald's, and I was going to school at Olive Harvey in Chicago. The arrangement was for me to give my mother rent money every week. I would give her $50 a week. And so that's what I would do. I would give her $50 a week. And this particular day, she wanted more money, and I wouldn't give it to her. And we just had this full-blown argument. And I was tired. I had a long day. And she told me I had to go. She said that me and my daughter, we had to leave. So, and I didn't understand. I'm like, well, Ma, I just gave you money for rent. I shouldn't have to leave right now. And, that's not fair. And we just, just had this big argument. And she called the police on me. She threw my clothes out the window. She threw everything out of the window. And so I'm looking out the window, and I just see all of our stuff laid out in the front. And the police came, and they basically just said that we had to go. There was nothing that I could do. I wasn't on the lease, but she didn't want us there, and we had to go. So I packed whatever I could in a duffel bag, and I just left the rest. So only thing that we literally had were the clothes in my bags, and the clothes and whatever toiletries I was able to put in a duffel bag, which really wasn't that big. And the police took us to a shelter. They took us to the police station in Chicago. And the way it works is that you just can't go to a shelter in Chicago. You have to get processed through. And so they took us to the police station on 51st Street, and we sat there all night. Probably maybe until the midnight, maybe a little after midnight. And I just remember my daughter just saying she was cold and she was hungry and she wanted to go to sleep, and and I'm like I didn't have answers. I couldn't do nothing. I was helpless at that point. And I remember police officers just coming over asking me if we were okay. Gave her some chips and, stuff like that, because we couldn't leave because we would miss the van, and the van would just come at any time. And finally, the van came a little after midnight, and we got in the van, and I just remember thinking, like, how did my life end up like this? How did I end up in a van going to a shelter when I have family that have money, and I have family that have a place to live, and how did I end up here? What did I do so bad? And so we made a couple of other stops at different police stations, picking people up until the van was full. And they took us to a shelter in Chicago, on the west side of Chicago, on 10 South Casey, and I didn't know what to expect. They just get out, and so you just get out with your stuff and you go in the building. And it was dark. It was a lot of people. I was scared. My daughter, she was holding my hand so tight. There was one cot per person, but they didn't have enough. So they said that I had to share a cot with my daughter, which was fine. They piled us in just one big room, and it was probably like 30 or 40 cots just kind of scattered out, and there were 3, maybe 4 long like lunchroom tables. And they gave us a brown box lunch or dinner. It was just a sandwich and a little juice and stuff. And so we ate that, and I, tried to make it as comfortable as possible so she can lay down and go to sleep. And I just remember just sitting up all night because I didn't know what type of people was in there. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if somebody would steal our stuff. I didn't know if somebody would hurt us. I didn't know what to expect. So I just kind of sat with my back against the wall and just sat and watched her sleep and just paying attention to what's going on around me. And people were yelling, people were screaming, arguing, and it was chaotic. Morning came and it couldn't come faster. So it couldn't come soon enough, because I knew at that time we would again be processed so that we can go to another destination. The people, they were so rude. They were really mean. They rushed you. They gave us another brown box breakfast, and I took my daughter. We ate breakfast, and I took her in the bathroom once everybody left out, and I locked the door so I can wash her up and have her clothes changed. And so I locked the door, and people were banging on the door, and it was literally like something out of a movie. I couldn't believe. I'm like, I remember feeling or thinking like, this feels like something out of a movie. People banging on the door. I'm washing my daughter up in a sink, and I'm crying, trying to maintain, but I can't because I don't know what to expect or what's going on around me. I didn't know why all this stuff was happening. And finally, sometime late morning, early afternoon, my name was finally called so that I could be processed. And they said that they would send me to a shelter just for women and children, and that I had to sit there. I had to sit there and wait. I couldn't leave. If I left, then I would have to start all over again. And so I just had to wait, and I waited and waited and waited all day. Finally, another white van came, and it was night. It was during the nighttime, and I remember this. We all got in the van. Everybody going to this particular shelter. We all got in the van, or surrounding shelters. We all got in the van, and I remember this. This one girl got in, and she had a few kids, maybe 3 or 4, and she looked young. She looked really young. But at that time, so I was about 18, so she looked like she was about my age, and she had 3 or 4 kids, and she had all these bags, and she got in, talking about different shelters and just acting like this was normal. And she talked about, oh, you don't want to go to this shelter, you don't want to go to that shelter, you don't want to do, and I'm like, why do you want to go to any shelter? And she just, that's what I was thinking in my head, but I'm just listening to her. But I just didn't, I'm like, this cannot be my life. I can't be living this right now. I have to be in a dream. This must be a dream. This must be a nightmare. And I still had classes, but I couldn't keep the job I quit. Like, for some reason or another, I decided to just quit the job I had. And like that day, just making decisions just out of confusion and anger and hurt. So we get to the shelter on the west side, and I'm from the south side of Chicago, so I'm being taken out of my element, out of my environment, where I'm not familiar with anything, and I'm put into this new environment. And I'm with my daughter, and I'm on the west side of Chicago. And we get to this place called Marcy Newberry, and it just looked like a big townhouse. I didn't know what to expect, and I'm like, it's going to be the way it was at this warehouse type place. And I get in, and they tried to make it as homey, as comfortable as possible. They had, standard, I guess what I would call standard shelter furniture, and had individual rooms. And so they assigned me a room with my daughter. And we, again, were processed in. We did everything. And so, but life still goes on. I couldn't miss my class because school was more important to me than a job, because I knew that school was going to eventually get me out of this position I'm in forever. So I couldn't stop going to school. I had to keep going. Even though I had all that stuff going on, I missed, that day of class. But I knew I had to get up and go to class the next day. I had to. I had no choice. And so I got up. We went to sleep that night. They fed us dinner. We went to sleep. And I got up the next morning, maybe about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And we left. We went to Olive Harvey College, where my daughter was attending the daycare at the school. And I went to class. And I did this every single day. So it wasn't a day, except on the weekends or a day I didn't have class, I would always be gone. Me and my daughter was always gone. I was always at school. That was my main focus, because I knew I could not stay in this position. I could not raise my kids like this. I had to get us out. And at that particular time, I had already made a decision for my son to live with his father's family. And so he was safe. He was with family, and he was okay. But I still had my daughter. And the shelter originally it was for people to stay there temporarily. I believe it was like 3 weeks. But I was able to stay longer. I was able to stay for 3 months. They let me stay for 3 months because they saw that I wasn't, I guess, your typical teenager who wasn't doing nothing and didn't want nothing. And so they let me stay longer than what I was supposed to. And the director, I had a conversation with the director, and I remember her telling me that she knew that I was going to make it, because she knew, because I got up every day and I went to school, and she didn't understand it at first. Like, how is she getting up doing all of this? But that was my motivation. That's what I held close to me. That's what I held close to my heart, because I knew I had to get out of this situation. That was my way out. That was my way out. Just working a regular job and trying to work myself up, that wasn't it for me. I knew I had to get an education. It was something I always wanted to do anyway, so I knew I had to do it no matter what. And she told me, she was like, normally we would have had to let you go, but you do what you're supposed to do, and that's why I'm letting you stay here longer. And she told me that she was trying to get me into a transitional living program, which is called like a TLP. It's transitional living program for homeless teenagers with or without kids. She told me to just stick what I'm doing. Don't switch nothing up. Just don't worry about what other people are saying. Just keep going through it. And I mean, throughout that time, even though it was 3 months, it seemed like forever. I mean, I got into arguments with people. I made friends with people. But I remember getting into a lot of arguments because I was looked at as their favorite, but they weren't doing anything. They got up and they did their chores, or they did what they were supposed to do, go take care of their business and come back, but they weren't really applying themselves the way I was applying myself. And they didn't understand that. They didn't know none of that stuff. This one night, and one of the staff pulled me to the side and she told me, I mean, the staff, they were so nice to me at this shelter. They were really nice to me. They really made sure that we had what we needed, me and my daughter. They probably did give us a little more leniency, but I was really applying myself. But this one particular night, one of the staff persons, and she took me aside and she told me that they had found a place for me and my daughter to go. And that we were gonna be leaving like within the next day or two, so I couldn't go to class because I had to be there for phone calls and take information or give them all the documents that I needed to give them. I was excited, I was nervous, I was scared, I was happy. It was just a lot of different emotions going through me at that time. And the next day the director came in and she told me the same thing, and she was really happy, and she's like, just keep doing what you doing, you gonna be okay. So the time came for us to be transported to the program. It was a shelter, but it was a program, the transitional living program facility. And that was back on the south side of Chicago, where I'm familiar. I was closer to everything that I needed to get to, and so I was happy about that. I'm like, okay, I'm back at home. But now I'm in this new place with all these new people, with all these problems. The good thing about it was that I literally had my own apartment. It was just me and my daughter. And, people say what they say, and they telling me, oh, you're going to have a roommate. And I'm like, it's too small in here to have a roommate. But not thinking, I was literally sharing a regular bedroom with me, my daughter, another adult, and one or two kids. And I'm saying, like, this studio apartment is too small. And so I had to change the way I was thinking. And I was like, wait, we'll be all right. Even if I do have to get a roommate, we'll figure it out.